Okay, today's video is over weather stations and weather maps and symbols. Once again, I'm not expecting you to be a meteorologist. I'm not a meteorologist, but as we go along, we're going to be taking each one of these things and kind of breaking them apart so that as you, if you want to continue, you can. So most of the time, a weather model is each one of these little things here. It's kind of a meteorologist shorthand so that you can get a whole bunch of information in a whole bunch of information in a little spot. And you probably don't know what shorthand is either. But this right here is kind of all of the data that is being presented at that point in time. On our weather maps up top, we have the date. Today is May 8th of 2020, and it is 14 Zurich time or Zulu, which right now with daylight savings time, this was made at 9 o'clock. Sorry about my phone. At 9 o'clock in the morning. So when we take a look at that, we have, as it's laid out, we have a circle. Over and up, we have our temperature. So this temperature is 64 degrees, and it's in Fahrenheit, which may seem weird because science is in Celsius, but this is made for the general public. When you watch weather, holy cow, when you watch the weather on the news, it is in Fahrenheit. Underneath it, this is going to be a descriptor of what the weather is like. And underneath that is going to be the dew point. I thought I had a slide for that. As we take a look at these, they're uniform. That rain is going to be dots. But in this case here, they made the dots white, so they had to put them in a black square. Snow sometimes is an X, sometimes it's an asterisk. Drizzle is supposed to be a comma. That's not a really good comma. And if we have multiple things happening, like freezing rain, we have this little loop-de-doo. If we have thunder, that's the R. And how I remember thunder is thunder. It's an R. And if it's heavy, the arrow gets blown over. Sorry, if I quit moving my mouse, there it is. You can see that that arrow gets bent over. What am I expecting you to memorize? I'm expecting you to understand rain is a period. Snow is an asterisk. And that's about it. Let me rephrase that. I also think you should understand a thunderstorm. But for the most part, I'm not expecting you to memorize it. I am going to ask you questions on it. So periods and asterisks are going to be the thing. And there's our dew point. And the dew point is going to tell us how much moisture is in the air. And then inside that circle is our cloud cover. And this cloud cover is going to be in percentages like 0, 25, 50, 75, 100. And one of the worksheets I have will have a line inside it. But for the most part, those are the numbers that we are going to be using. Up here is going to be our air pressure. And that's a model number. And we will be spending some time on this a little bit later. The air pressure is not 027, but that actually represents a number like 10,002.7, and we will be talking about that later. And then the tail or the flags give us wind direction and wind speed. So as we take a look at this, that is the direction that the wind is coming from. With the top being north, the bottom being south. And I'm not quite for sure if my camera is going to mix this up, but west is going to be on your left and east is going to be on your right. So for me, this is going to be, the wind is out of the southeast, and a long bar is going to be 10 and a short bar is going to be 5. And we'll be taking a look at that some more too. So anytime we have a single bar by itself, if it's not at the end, you see that's at the end, we're going to call that a 10. And if it's not at the end, we're going to call it a 5. So if it's at the end, we're going to call it a 10. Not at the end, we call it a 5. And then we add a long plus a short is 15. 2 longs is 20, and so on and so forth. And I'll be making a video over a key or a code that we can use to help you on that. And once again, on maps, we have our low pressures, we have our high pressures, we have our warm fronts, cold fronts, occluded fronts, stationary fronts, and we have things called isobars. And iso meaning the same, bars for barometric pressure, or the air pressure. It's technically barometric pressure. So if you were to walk along this line, all the way along that line, you would have the exact same air pressure. And as we go, we're going to talk about why these isobars are important. And this right here is a really nice kind of cheat sheet if you want. It has all of the information. Once again, the rain is going to be in periods or dots. And the more dots you have, the heavier the rain. And there's our asterisks for snow. The more asterisks you have, the more snow you have. And here's our thunder, which is on the bottom underneath that. I'm sorry. But that's going to be your R for your thunderstorm. So I don't know if you can print it or if you want to save this. That's a really good one. So here's our isobars. And when we take a look at our isobars, I'll save that for later. I got a video on that I'll make. And here's one, and it has a high pressure and a low pressure. And these are isobars that go around. And we have our cold front. And here's a cold front, and there's a warm front. So this is just something that you might see on a weather map. And this is when I would talk about Zulu time. Greenwich, England is 0 degrees or 0 Zulu. And as you go back, we have to subtract time, and as you go forward, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So here's another weather map. Here's our low. And as that low pressure, the air is going up. So as the air goes up, the air is going to go into the low. So the air is going to spin counterclockwise around the low. So this is our air, our warm front, and it is curling that way. Here's our cold front. And when the cold front catches up to a warm front, we have an occluded front. So here's our occluded front that's starting to zipper. And you can see this one here will start to zipper into that one. And here's a big one with a real high low. And we'll talk about this again, that when this cold catches up to that warm and it turns into an occluded front, that's when things are going to get really bad. And here's April 28th in 2018. I'm sorry, 2015. At 10 Zulu, that would have been 5 in the morning. So at Minneapolis, St. Paul, the temperature was 46 degrees and the dew point was 35, and the wind was out of the south at 5, and I'm going to call it 5 because it looks like that stick is going down, and that cloud cover I would say is 75%. And then we have things, these are called isotherms. So if you walked along this line, all the way along that line, it should be 40 degrees. And we'll talk about isotherms a little bit later. And here's our isobars, and we'll come back to those again. And here is a map that has everything on it. So this is our intro to weather maps, and every day we will be taking